And we've got plenty of sport to talk about, but something, whilst we talk about sport all the time, something that we don't perhaps speak enough about, sometimes some people might think we speak too much about, is referees and refereeing, because we know that post-match there's always plenty of chatter going on from the various coaches, and I've not been exempt to that. I won't ever say that. There's always plenty of chatter about the referees and getting it right or getting it wrong. I don't know that we always recognise how much work goes into refereeing. And I'm not just talking about the physical fitness or necessarily knowing the rules. It's about being able to manage circumstances, understand people and people interactions, and being able to think on the run and make decisions that are split-second decisions that impact both the flow of a game but also oftentimes the outcome. Dr. Joe joins me now, and Dr. Joe, you've written a book and a guidebook or a workbook. One's called The Whistleblower and the other's called The Whistleblower.
Yeah,
one's a workbook.
One's the workbook, yes. Yeah,
Sorry, I thought I'd be a bit clever there.
In panic there, I just momentarily looked at my cover and thought, surely I didn't get that, didn't miss that part of it. Yeah, that's right, Grant. Thanks for having me on. So, yeah, wrote the first book, The Whistleblower. It's that mental toughness guidebook for referees and sporting officials. And then it seemed that with the feedback that I was getting from the referees that read the first book, that they were keen to really tuck into some of the content and work through some of the suggestions and the things that they can do for their own mental game.
Yeah, because it is, as much as anything, there's a resilience component. There's thinking under pressure and making decisions under pressure. There's also, I imagine, an acceptance that not everyone's happy with the decision, but you've got to move on from it. You can't hold the decision. All those parts of it are, from my side of things, quite similar to the playing side of things, because we'll make decisions, we're working under pressure, we'll get things wrong, but we've got to move on. And it probably applies as well in the workplace. It applies across a range of places where we are making decisions, and there's a set of parameters or a set of rules or a set of expectations. And I'm not just talking about the rules that we play by. They're the rules that govern the officiating.
Yeah, absolutely, because we know that when you do take on that officiating role, it's a life skill, isn't it, for all those elements that you talked about. And one of the things and I guess it depends on the sport, one of the things I've often noticed is that for some sports, the players themselves, there might be moments in the game where they do get a little bit of a reprieve. So in footy, if you're on the right edge and everything's happening on the left edge, you're not switched off fully. You're not contributing in that particular moment. You're watching and observing and you're participating in that way. But the referees and the officials, they're on for the whole time that they're on. So that fatigue factor, the fitness factor that referees need, but that, like you said, that decision-making under pressure is a really critical element of it, and then being able to stand by their own decisions and how they manage the emotional regulation of the players around them as well, because there's no doubt that they have a really significant impact in terms of how they deliver a decision and then how they regulate all of the things that are happening on the field for both teams.
Yeah, and I suppose in saying that, it's how important certain things are. And I know one of the things when I've talked to referees away from the game, just discuss what's going on. Some of it is about understanding that we've got so many rules in every sport, but some of them aren't so important to the flow of a game. And as coaches, as players, as people involved in the game, there's some rules that we go, you know what, at this particular time, it's not so important to blow that. And I'm envious at times of rugby union, and we're going to be talking to Dan Withers a bit later on, but they hold the penalty, they hold the adjudication, they let things go. And I remember when I did my referee's ticket a lot of years ago for rugby league, and yes, I have refereed a number of games in different levels, but we were always told about having a really long piece of string on your whistle. And the intention there was it takes you a while to reel your whistle in before you blow it. And obviously you didn't, you still had your whistle in your hand, but it was that notion of having some time, giving yourself some thinking time. But you are switched on all the time. There's very few roles in life where you don't get time to switch off.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's one of the reasons why I've spent a lot of time talking with referees and helping them to build some of that mental resilience because, as you said, it's that split-second decision-making that they're doing, that do I pause, do I hold this, what is the flow of the game? All of those elements are having to be considered by those officials, and there's a pressure that comes with that. And even for, depending on the sport, depends on the proximity of, say, supporters. If you look at local basketball, the crowd are sitting very close to the court, whereas touch football, from what I've seen, is there's designated places where people can sit and they actually keep people a little bit further away from the field. So even some of those elements can influence the decision-making and the pressure that gets put on players and on officials. So there's lots of considerations from a mental point of view.
And that reaction from player to referee is a result of the reaction from crowd, supporters, parents.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I won't say what sport, but I was talking to a parent who I knew as an athlete when they were younger, and they'd left the particular ground where they were watching junior sport on that day, and they said, I couldn't be there. The interactions between the parents' entitlement to think that they can interact with what was going on the field was just unacceptable. And they said, I had to leave. And it's becoming harder and harder. I certainly know in rugby league that there's wardens and game wardens and field wardens and people patrolling the grounds.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been my experience as a sports parent, and that now with some of the sports. So some of the officials would be designated or wear a particular colour sock to indicate that they're a referee under the age of 18. I know in basketball, I saw it just this week, that the lanyard that goes around the whistle is green, indicating particular things. And I get torn with that because I think it's good to help. I guess it's like showing that you've got your L plates on or your P plates on.
But it shouldn't be necessary.
Yeah, and that's the thing where I get torn with it, because I think we should actually be treating everyone respectfully and not pulling back on it because they're under 18. And I know when I've been that official parent and I take my deck chair down to watch the sport, I used to always sit a long way away because I couldn't listen to the comments that were coming from people on the sidelines and so forth. So I think it's really important, like you said, you've had an experience refereeing, many of us have, and I think when you get that experience, it hopefully gives you a lot more empathy for the role that our officials have in the middle of the field, on the court, whether they're adjudicating in other events as well. Thought there was a gap in the market in terms of having conversations around this mental space for referees, and so that's why I wanted to put together something that talked about how do you build the mental toughness, but then also in the back there's a guide there for how do you build officials' well-being and mental fitness as well in that perspective.
Now, one of the things I noticed, and I said to you when you first came into the studio here, the start of the book, as you would expect with a book on refereeing, there's a whole lot of rules.
There are a whole lot of rules.
But the rules are there more as a guide of, rather than a contents or an index or chapters, they're rules for the referee to help prepare and make themselves right for the game initially, but then rules that would support them conducting themselves through the course of a game.
Yeah, it seemed to make sense to me that when I thought about, you think that when you write a book, it's like, how do I structure it? The person reading it, what's going to make sense to them? So it seemed to be the logical step to put it in the format of a rule book, if you like. So I've broken each rule into different sections about what's the game plan here, what's the advantage of this particular rule, what's the penalty if you don't do it. So just putting it in that sort of language and keeping it short and sharp, because there'll be some areas here that some officials will look at it and go, that's an obvious one, I know that I'm doing that. So I think it's good to point out the things that we know that we're doing well. I've always been a big fan of success leaves clues. So if referees read some of the rules and go, yes, I'm doing that, then that's great, because chances are they are doing many of the things that are in there, but there's always skills that we can develop, and so that's why I wanted to go a little bit broader with some of the topics that was covered within it.
I've got to say, you gave me about 3.5 minutes to read the book before we started. But I've got to say, I liked Rule 4 or Section 4, however you want to break it down, and it fits a little bit with what we talked about before, but Rule 4 is the power of the whistle. But it doesn't just talk about the whistle. It's Rule 4.1, control what you can, accept what you can't, the art of letting go. That's, to me, speaks for so many areas in life. As a parent, you go, what am I going to win by doing this? And on the field, it's so much about that. Yes, you have all the power as a referee, or most of the power. The players don't think so, but you really do. And that, what am I going to win by blowing this rule? What am I going to win by adjudicating on this? Is it something that I can just talk on the run and let happen and say, I'll come back to that if I need to, but let's not see that again? And the next part of it is think before you act, consequences of each call, influence through presence, and I love this, your body speaks first, and it's gestures. And I know talking to young referees when I was helping with some refereeing courses, clear signalling, making sure that everyone was aware what was happening, because when confusion creeps in, that's a frustration.
Yeah, absolutely. That consistency of message, whatever the message might be. And I can remember coaching young netball teams back in the day, and I always remember, used to say the players, like in netball, judging, gosh, it was a long time ago because we used to refer to it as 3 feet. I don't even know if they refer to it as that anymore. Maybe we've gone metric since I was coaching netball. But I used to always say to the players...
I've got Mark Cedar on later. I'll ask you.
Yeah, ask Mark if it's still 3 feet. But I guess everyone gets... that's a judgment call. So I always used to say to the players, don't worry about what the distance is. Just work out what the referee's calling and then play to that. So I think it is really important that we understand what we can control, what we can't. And like you say, it's a life lesson. So that's one of the things that I do love about sport in general, whether it be playing or officiating or coaching, is that it gives us so many opportunities to practice some of life's lessons. And what happens for us in sport flows over into other areas of our lives as well.
Yeah, and Rule 8, bounce back blueprint.
Yes.
That's resilience.
That is resilience 101, yes. I wasn't going to call it resilience because we see the name
it
resilience.
It gets used all around the place and no one knows what it really means.
I know, and it gets used because it's such a valid point, isn't it? It's not so we can't control what happens to us, just how we react and or respond to it. So it is, and it's that expectation and understanding that things are going to go wrong. That's actually part of what sport offers us. But how do we learn from it and how do we move forward, gain some wisdom from it? So all those elements become really important.
So that whole section, I think, is tremendous. And the other one was about growth and development. And I'm not going to pull the whole book apart because otherwise people won't look at them. But I just want to show that I did actually look through some sections.
I'm grateful for that, Grant. I'm very grateful for that. Jess
didn't let me look through too much because she rules the producer with an iron ruler. Not an iron thumb.
Maybe that's the next book, The Producing Blueprint or something. We'll base it on Jess.
But Rule 10, reflect and grow.
Yes.
And that is that review process that says, whether I got it right or wrong, don't dismiss it. Don't dismiss everything.
No.
We used to work, when I was at the Newcastle Knights, the psychologists who used to work with us there used to talk about the suitcase or the box. And you put everything in the box and unpack it later. And you need to unpack it. Otherwise, the box just overflows with stuff you haven't dealt with and it repeats. I'm imagining that chapter talks about that processes where we can reflect and grow and get things going.
Yes. And I think I said before, success leaves clues. And the other part of that phrasing that I always use is success leaves clues and disappointments offer lessons. There's an opportunity after every game.
And that was an earlier chapter.
And just like every sporting team would do, what we want referees to do is post-performance, think about what did I do that went well, because presumably I want to do that again next week when I come out and ref. And then what did I do where I could learn from, or how could I grow? So what's the lesson in that? And like you said, that applies to all of us. We can finish our working week, whatever we're doing, with the same sort of questions we can ask ourselves. I work a lot in defence, and their after-action reviews are all about assessing what went well and where do we need to be better next time. So that kind of template works well, and particularly so in the sporting field.
Do you ignore the robust feedback that you might get?
I guess what you do, I guess what you have to understand is what's going to be helpful for me.
So if there's a theme to it, is it something you might unpack and say, yeah, some of that was robust and inappropriate, but is there a justification behind it? Is there something that's sat there that's actually telling me something?
I would certainly explore it. I wouldn't dismiss it. Like you said, the delivery of it may not have been great, but the theme of it might be consistent. And the thing is that what I've found with referee communities is there are forums and places to review. Even when I've seen referees at the highest level, there's usually a referee coach or an equivalent term observing the game and giving feedback. And the challenge for a referee or official is if there is a deficit within their officiating that they're not paying attention to, they probably won't proceed any higher through the ranks if that's one of the things that they're aiming to do. So there's always merit in us taking on board the feedback. And I guess it's just understanding that at times that can be challenging in terms of how it's delivered. But I think if there's a message there for us to think about, it's always worth exploring and learning the lesson.
If you're refereeing the referee, is it just as important to understand those rules? And when I'm talking about refereeing the referee, that is that coach who's working with them to understand at half time, if I piled in all of this information, or you got this wrong, or you got this right, have I got to be really conscious of impacting that performance in the second half?
Yeah, absolutely, because we're all humans in all of this. And in fact, someone did say to me, you could just take that book, take out the word referee and replace it with coach, because I think the common themes are consistent for all of us. But the challenge for a coach is a coach also has to be able to... There's so many things going on in the head of a coach, and I don't need to tell you that. You're thinking about the performance, you're thinking about the players, you're thinking about your own behaviours, you're thinking about the referees, and whether you're consciously doing, that's what you're actually managing all of those things. So how do you have a constructive conversation with an official in a way that you can get your message across? Because if you just have a blast at them, chances are you're not going to get to where you need to, and it's probably going to hinder your performance more so than help it.
Yeah, and part of what you're saying there is very true. Now, we're going to have to let you go, Joe, because I've got to get AFL in. They're wonderful 2 books, and it's probably something we can talk more about. And it'd be useful to get a couple of people who've used the book to come in next time and talk about it and the application of it, and you might want to have a think about some referees that we might be able to...
in mind. Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, very open to getting feedback from anyone who has read the book and what they've found. A bit like the referees need to do. What have they found helpful and what's missing?
That is that feedback on what's there.
What did I not consider? It's a big thank you to everyone who has read it, and particularly our indie bookshops that stock it.
And you use the other book that's called The Whistleblower.
Workbook. Yeah, if you look to the bottom of the book, Grant, it definitely says
You didn't give me much time. Dr. Joe Lukens, it's always a pleasure to have you in here.
Thank you,
I know you're away for the next couple of weeks, but we might think about some people that we can bring in and use.
Would love to. Thanks, Grant.